John Lennon tried to use home movies in his 1984 music video. The lawyers for Yoko Ono stopped it right away. That was just the start. She was in charge of everything that had to do with John Lennon's name for many years. Julian fought back twice in court, which took years and cost a lot of money. But everything fell apart for him in 1998. He found out that Yoko had lost $20 million from the estate in bad investments, but she wouldn't tell him anything. He tells her today why he'll never forgive her and what John really said before he died. Julius Charles John Lennon was born at Septon General Hospital in Liverpool at 6:50 a.m. on April 8, 1963. He was just under 8 lb. The Beatles, his dad's band, had a #1 song that week called Please. Please Me. John wasn't there. When his wife Cynthia gave birth, he was playing at a club in London. After 3 weeks, Brian Epstein, the boss, became Julian's godfather. There was a lot of press there, and the baby was shot like a Beatles prop. It was said that when John finally saw his son, he asked, "Who's going to take care of it? Not him, not my son, just it?" Cynthia had quietly written on John's birth certificate that he was a singer, not Beatle, which didn't help. Within months, fans found their house and had to put up gates. Julian was named after John's mother, Julia, who was killed by a car when John was 17. His middle name, Charles, came from Cynthia's father. John didn't like it. In a letter to his Aunt Mimi in 1964, he called it a compromise I didn't want to make. That letter sold for $28,000 in 2012. Years later, John admitted something worse. Julian was born in a hotel room after drinking too much whiskey. He wasn't wanted or planned. John later told a therapist that becoming a father at age 22 was the worst thing he had ever done. When Julian was 6 months old, he was put on a blanket during a Beatles photo shoot at Abbey Road. The band stood around him for a picture that was published in magazines all over the world. John barely looked at the baby. In one photo that was never published, he was holding Julian stiffly with a grimace. Cynthia was the one calming him down between flashes. By his first birthday, Julian had been in 34 Beatles-related publications without permission. Cynthia tried to sue one of the magazines, but the court threw out the case because children did not have rights to their own images. At 18 months, Julian's first word wasn't Mama or Dada. He could never get enough of the Beatles songs. He would point at the TV and yell, "Da!" at strangers with guitars. Every evening around 6, he waited at the window hoping John would come home. He rarely did. A neighbor later said that Julian would scream when a car pulled up, then cry when it wasn't his dad. By age 2, he could recognize Jay's voice on the radio better than in person. Cynthia wrote that it broke her heart. When she told John, his only response was, "He'll get over it." In 1965, John drew many cartoons of Julian, including ones with guitars and a mop-top haircut, but he only spent 11 days with Julian that year. Cynthia's housekeeper wrote in her diary that John had started using heroin and was often distant, even at dinner. One drawing showed Julian at age 21 holding a syringe, which was later called a chilling prediction. Cynthia found the drawings in 1967, but John told her it was just dark humor. The notebooks were hidden until 1996, when they were brought up again during a legal battle over the estate. In court records from 1970, John told Cynthia that Julian came too early for his rock and roll lifestyle. Some people in the know said that John put his art and identity ahead of his child, Julian. He even thought about sending Julian to boarding school when he was 2 years old, but Cynthia threatened to tell the press, so the idea was shelved. During Beatles meditation sessions in India, John told Paul that Julian was his karmic punishment. Paul later confirmed this in an interview. Julian didn't hear about this until years later, and it broke his heart. In November 1966, John went to a small art gallery and met Yoko Ono. She had a blank canvas on display, and John paid 5 shillings to hammer a nail into it. Soon after, John began calling Yoko late at night while Cynthia slept. By January 1967, he had been to Yoko's studio 14 times. By spring, Cynthia found love notes from him. When she confronted him, he just said, "I've found my soulmate." Julian was 4 years old when he filmed the Magical Mystery Tour with the Beatles. He sat next to Ringo Starr, who gave him candy and let him play with drumsticks. John hardly noticed him because he was talking on the phone with Yoko. Cynthia said he took 17 calls from Yoko during the 2-day shoot. During one of their fights, John threw a camera at Julian. The window just missed Julian's head by a few inches. Someone on the team remembered John telling Cynthia, "She gets me better than you ever will." He later said, Ringo was more of a father that week than John had ever been. Julian clung to Ringo the whole time. In March 1967, Julian brought home a crayon painting from nursery school. Stars around a girl named Lucy. When John asked what it was, Julian said, "It's Lucy in the sky with diamonds." That night, John wrote one of the Beatles' most famous songs, but when reporters asked him about the title, he brought up the drug reports. He said that his son wasn't the inspiration. Julian found out the truth years later by reading a fan magazine. John once said, "My son doesn't understand what I created from his ridiculous scribble." Decades later, the girl in the painting confirmed it, but John never acknowledged her. John filed for divorce in November 1968, saying that the marriage had irretrievably broken down. Cynthia's lawyers got her a $100,000 settlement and $2,400 a year in child support, which was a small amount of Jay's millions. During the 6-week process, Julian only saw John twice. The first time, John broke a guitar during a fight over custody, and the second time they spent 30 minutes together at Christmas while being watched. Yoko waited outside in the Rolls-Royce. John's lawyer said that he didn't want to have much to do with Julian. Cynthia told the judge that John had once said, "Julian makes me think of all the mistakes I've made." On Julian's 6th birthday, April 8, 1969, John was in Montreal with Yoko holding a bed-in for peace. Instead of showing up, he sent a telegram that read, "Happy birthday, Jules. I'm sorry, I'm busy with peace. Thanks, Dad. It came after the party was over." Cynthia later said Julian cried for 3 days. That week, John had 134 interviews but never called his son, a secretary at Apple Corps. During the divorce, many people heard John say that Julian wasn't really his son, it was just biology. When Yoko got pregnant, John fully embraced her daughter from a previous marriage. The worst thing happened in 1980, just weeks before Jay's death, in a Playboy interview. He said that Sean, his son with Yoko, was the real one. Planned, wanted, and loved from conception. Julian read that when he was 17. It broke something in him. Yoko used that against him. In a later interview, John's brother-in-law said he had heard the phrase, "not our only son," more than once and even had a recording of it. In the spring of 1981, Julian Lennon was only 18 years old when Atlantic Records offered him a deal. It all started with some simple demos he'd made at home using a basic 4-track task setup. Producer Tony Dimitriadis heard something in those early recordings, and Julian soon found himself recording his debut album Velote at George Martin's AIR studios in Montserrat. The sessions were expensive. They cost $400,000, and they were big. A 12-member gospel choir tried to achieve the rich, full sound that made Phil Spector famous. Julian Lennon's murder put him in a quiet place in the country cottage where his mother, Cynthia, lived. The lyrics of the song Valet talked about that time of being alone. During recording, producer Phil Rayon made him do 47 vocal takes of the title track. At one point, Julian broke down in tears because of memories of John's harsh criticism. It took 8 months to mix the album, and Julian personally reviewed and approved 156 edits. Atlantic saw a lot of potential and spent $1.2 million on marketing the album, banking on the Lennon legacy. The album came out on October 17, 1984, and debuted at number 17 on the Billboard 200. It sold 143,000 copies in its first week, which was a record for a British album. In December of that year, Julian's solo debut went platinum in the U.S., selling over 1 million copies and 2.4 million copies around the world. The single Too Late for Goodbyes reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. Julian directed the music video himself using childhood footage that Cynthia gave him, even though Yoko Ono tried to stop him with legal threats. MTV played the video 47 times that November, Critics said Julian's voice sounded eerily like Jay's, and Rolling Stone called it inheriting the DNA of genius. By the end of the year, Julian had earned $780,000 in royalties. Atlantic reported 3. He made $8 million from the project in total. In February 1985, he was nominated for Best New Artist at the Grammys, but lost to Sade. Backstage, Madonna confronted him over a quote in Smash Hits in which he called her song "Material Girl" vapid. She accused him of riding on his father's fame, and he fought back, yelling until security had to step in. The fight made headlines for 3 days, and even though Julian's album sold 340,000 more copies than Sade's, his loss led to talk of a backlash against the Lennon name in the music business. Julian began his North American tour in April 1985, starting in Boston. Over the next few months, he performed 38 shows in 32 cities, selling $2.1 million worth of tickets. But on May 28th in Detroit, he lost his voice. Doctors diagnosed acute